exciting announcement on Monday. I'm sure you've heard back from a lot of interested parties afterwards.
I have. The response was as expected.
So I guess what I'm really interested in knowing, because when we first sat down in March and we talked about what your plans were for renewable energy here, you said that LNG could be a potential cost savings in the near term.
Right.
What caused you to change your mind?
Well, a couple things. I think, obviously the price of oil has a big impact, and, especially when you look at the difference in price between oil and the proposals for LNG. Certainly the savings advantage has been shrinking significantly, and that's part of it. I think the other half of it, which always was the notion of why it's transitional, is because it still is an imported fossil fuel, and the capital investment required to change from fuel oil to LNG is significant, and we're getting better understanding of what they are. HECO and the other parties are, in the bid process, and so we are definitely getting a better idea of what would be involved. The third area really is about approval and regulatory approval, about all the work that would be required, in environmental studies and all of the permitting that would be involved with approval of a LNG facility. Again, also just ends up being more work, and, in a lot of different areas ends up being kind of a distraction to the issue of moving forward with renewables.
So a lot of LNG advocates do say that it is cheaper and cleaner. Do you not believe that, or what do you believe?
I do believe that it is a cleaner. I think the other part of that, though, is it can be cheaper. It really depends on what the price backs, the quotes that we get back. A lot of it ends up being, though, that it does require contracts, and so depending on how that's structured. So part of the challenge, and I have had in both of my trips to Washington, D.C., I have been meeting with the Environmental Protection Agency and the regulators, and talking about flexibility for Hawaii as we look at regulation of the oil refineries as well as the power plants. And so clearly the federal government is moving toward more flexibility for the states in how it regulates emissions. And I think, so it's a combination of all of those things. We do anticipate that we would get more flexibility from the regulators, the EPA primarily, in how we manage emissions from both the refineries as well as the power generation facilities. The price difference between oil and LNG is shrinking, and the cost advantage to LNG is shrinking. The huge capital investment required to transform from oil fuel base to LNG is still an issue, and obviously if the utilities were to make those investments, then there would be an expectation to get a return on those investments, and that would impact. And so I think it was just a combination of all of those factors that I think when you look at the issue, it certainly seemed to be more of a distraction than part of what we should be moving forward with.
What about LNG makes it less flexible?
Well, remember that there's a whole infrastructure that's currently set up with the refineries out to the power plants that supports delivery of fuel oil from the refineries up into the plants. We would essentially have to replicate all of that infrastructure. So some way to import it, some facility to regasify, and then some process to deliver the LNG to the power plants. So, and that investment would entail hundreds of millions of dollars. Not to mention just the physical regulatory requirements. So our regulatory agencies would have to review all of those permit requires and seek to ensure that it's safe. And as I said, it still ends up being replacing an imported fossil fuel with another imported fossil fuel.
I'm wondering how committed you are to this this stance that you've taken. Is there anything that the company's pushing for LNG or the public opinion? Like, can either of those?
Well, I mean, I'm expressing my opinion. When I came in office, obviously LNG has been something that has been circulating for a number of years. When the price of oil was above $100 per barrel, clearly there seemed to be significant savings involved, and so it made at least it appear as it might be useful as a transition fuel. But I think as we move forward with the price of oil dropping significantly, with the cost of capital investments required to set up this infrastructure to change from one fossil fuel to another again, and the expectation that it would take years of permitting and regulatory review before we, not to mention just the construction involved, it makes the window of LNG serving as a transitional fuel shorter and smaller as we move forward.
So Hawaii Gas is expected to come out with certain numbers about it, and I think the end of next month.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be willing to sit down with HECO or Hawaii Gas if they could sway? Could they sway you?
No, I mean, I am open to meeting with them. I mean, if they find it useful. There's, like I said, I have been looking at it for a while, and when you just look at all the components involved, I suppose they would have maybe more firm quotations on the various scenarios, and I think that would be helpful. As I said, part of it is really about what the future holds, and it's very difficult to predict. And again, I think it's just a combination of those kinds of things when you look at whether we should or shouldn't be considering.
So if they, with those firm numbers, could those firm numbers sway your stance?
I'd be interested to seeing what they are. I think it just gets back to, and we'll have a better idea potentially. My guess is that it's still hundreds of millions of dollars in capital investment. We would have a firmer idea of what the potential savings might be, and I think part of the other part of that equation is that we do know that renewables are getting less expensive as we kind of proceed through the process. So I think that all of those things are part of the inputs to any kind of decision making.
Okay, yeah. So going forward, LNG is it not necessarily set in stone then? The LNG's off the table?
Well, I mean, I think the Public Utilities Commission and those are the regulatory agencies that would have to deal with the issue. I definitely would not support at this point in time, LNG for electricity generation. I do understand that Hawaii Gas has to be looking at other alternatives from their business perspective.
And I'd like to ask a couple of things about the NextEra-HECO deal or HEI deal.
Sure.
In regards to your opposition in July, you said in its current form.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm interested, is there anything, with that statement, the door's kind of left open, is there anything that NextEra could do or HEI could do that could change your mind?
Well, I mean, I think it really, there's a process that's involved with the Public Utilities Commission, where I would say less than a third through the process. All of the interveners have filed their formal testimony on the issue, and there's been an exchange of questions and answers between all the parties. So I look forward to NextEra's response, about their stating the case. As I said, my concern was when you looked at all the information provided, there we are looking for a partner in the electric utility that really embraces 100% renewable and I think more importantly, changing the business model from the traditional electric utility to what would work in a fully distributed generation renewable future, and so it's really looking for what that commitment might be. There are significant concerns about the fact that Hawaii would become just such a small part of NextEra, and what attention would be played as part of that. The fact that there was no direct input in terms of decisions, having an advisory board, the whole issue of governance and where would decisions be made and whether those decisions would be made on behalf of NextEra, which is 90% not in Hawaii, and how those decisions on the business impact Hawaii and operations in Hawaii and the commitment to 100% renewable.
Okay, so if we're kind of summing it up, would it be the 100% renewable commitment, and then?
Well, I think it's beyond that, right? I mean, clearly, we would hope that we would be able to find a partner that shares our vision. For one, we would be hopeful that we could find a partner who would also embrace the notion that Hawaii can become a test bed for a number of research and investment opportunities. We would be looking for someone who could help. Clearly the PV penetration in Hawaii is unlike any other in the world, and there is much to be learned by that, and we want to be looking for business and investment partners that will help build R&D and other activity that would be related to that, that would help facilitate Hawaii becoming the leader in renewable energy resource development, research development about how to manage and integrate distributed renewables into a electric utility grid.
As you say that, kind of different firms coming in that have shown interest in Hawaii, do we need a partner to do it? Can Hawaiian Electric do it on its own?
Hawaiian Electric has done very well here, and we do know that part of at least their stated reasons for the proposed merger is that they need access to more capital, and the merger would help them with that. And I do think that as we move forward, because of the unique situation in Hawaii, the commitment to 100% renewable, and our desire to really be focused on development of renewable generation, I think it does invite a partner that really is committed to renewables and how to best maximize their use in an electric utility grid, how to study what's the best way to ensure high penetrations, eventually 100% renewable into a utility grid, and what kinds of storage, regeneration, even in the event of, or even to the point of exploring what kinds of regulatory policies make sense. How do you change the financial business model of the utility in light of 100% renewable generation? I think that there are lots of issues and opportunities that are accompanied by our commitment to 100% renewable, that an active business partner would help not only build business and job opportunities in Hawaii, but investment opportunities.
It's just we don't know if NextEra was that right partner.
Right. And based on the information that was submitted as part of the Q&As, there wasn't clear commitment to that.
Moving with that, looking into how LNG and HECO has, NextEra and HECO have both said that LNG will be helpful as we transition, especially for the utilities plan. What are we going to do to kind of compensate for the lack of LNG as a bridge fuel? Are prices going to be higher for the meantime?
Well, remember that the fuel oil is our existing platform. So yes, the cost of fuel oil has a direct impact on the rates charged, but we would avoid the significant investment that would be required by the utility to change from fuel oil-based distribution to LNG. And so that would be the investment that we would not have to incur. So yes, there may be a fuel savings, but by bringing in LNG, there would be an increase in capital investment that would have to be recovered, and that's the offset. It becomes difficult to determine what the savings might be in light of that.
And following up with both of these two announcements you've made with over the summer, LNG was one of HECO's biggest initiatives, part of its PSIP, and NextEra is also one of the, I guess, major initiatives of HEI right now. Are you anti-HECO?
No, I mean, I'm not anti-HECO. I am pro-partner that shares our vision for 100% renewable, shares our vision for Hawaii being a showcase for renewable energy generation and management, along with our military partner who also has agreed and working very hard to be sustainable from a fuel perspective. We believe that this environment, with the state setting aggressive policy direction, with a military partner willing to invest in research and development and sharing a similar commitment to renewables, that we would like to find a utility partner that wants to be part of that environment.
And when you made the announcement about LNG this week, had you spoken to anyone from Hawaii Electric or Hawaii Gas beforehand?
I have met with them on different things. We've been working with the agencies in the state, the PUC, the Consumer Advocate, also talking to the State Energy Office, in a lot of different issues. I've been working with the Department of Health on the regulatory issues. Like I said, on both of my trips to Washington, D.C., I've met with the Administrator Gina McCarthy at EPA and talking about the federal government oversight on clean energy and the view of the regulatory. So there was lots of conversations with a lot of different people about trying to understand better the options and the challenges of LNG. And then really looking forward about what makes the most sense in moving the state toward that 100% future.
There was definitely an element of surprise over the last 3 days of earlier this week, and so were the local stakeholders notified that was going to happen?
Well, it is one of those things about trying to decide what's the best forum to try to make some of these announcements. I guess it's trying to weigh. I have been thinking about this for all of the 8 months or so of being serving as governor. Like I said, I have been working the regulatory issues because those are the ones that the state more directly controls and have some input in, and then talking with those state agencies involved, so Consumer Advocate, PUC, and the State Energy Office, just trying to find a way forward in this area. I do know that, LNG, I think, is one of those issues that you could make a case for doing it, and you can make a case for not doing it. And I think if you looked at both of those equations, they're both very complex sets of challenges that would be presented. like I said, I think the challenge for transitioning from oil to LNG is more significant in terms of capital investments and the changes that would be required, versus really with the low price of oil. Fuel oil is really status quo. That's what we do today. That's what we've been doing for many, many years, and that's what we want to get away from. So, part of the decision was really, are we better off, especially with the reduction in oil costs and the indication from the federal regulators that they would be supportive of regulatory flexibility, that we could pursue clean air standards in different ways than facility by facility limits. I felt that we could find a way to defer unnecessary investments in existing oil-based power plants and refineries, and really focus investments and new investments in renewables that, my judgment is that is a better course to take than transitioning over and then transitioning again.
So the local stakeholders didn't know.
I did not discuss it directly with local stakeholders per se, at least in terms, it is one of those issues that, it's always a balance of trying to have conversations. I mean, I've had conversations with people about the benefits of LNG or, the challenges of pursuing and going through this. So, I definitely had gathered a lot of information about different perspectives of what it would mean that helped formulate my decision. But, I do know that the decision about whether to pursue it or not pursue it, I think, is one of those that you could make a case on both sides of the equation. And because, oil prices and LNG prices are both uncertain, it will be at some point in time, judgment has to be exercised. And so that was kind of my conclusion.
So you're getting your information from EPA federally and from just the different...
the state agencies, Department of Health has the Clean Air Branch, Clean Water Branch, and those kinds of regulatory organizations. So they extend and implement the rules of the federal government. But talking to those in the State Energy Office, obviously, as part of the process of reviewing the proposed merger, talking with the different state agencies that are participating, and then talking about the other, consumer advocate, some of the members on the Public Utilities Commission and staff, DCCA, the various regulatory agencies in state government.
And as we talk about kind of everyone who's involved as we're making these decisions going forward, I'm curious, has a member of your transition team, Robbie Alm, has he played a role in any of these decisions you made regarding Hawaiian Electric over the past few months? I
mean, I have talked with Robbie on time to time. Yeah, he's a volunteer. He doesn't get paid in the office. I respect his advice on a number of things. He's been involved with healthcare and leadership training and a bunch of other things. And yes, I talked with Robbie about a couple different perspectives on LNG and 100% renewable in general. But he was one of many that was consulted in various ways.
Was he involved anyway in the NextEra decision as well?
Not really. The NextEra decision and my position on NextEra was really a result of, as you know, there are several agencies involved in that directly in that proceeding. We did meet early on when the application was proposed merger was first submitted to the PUC. We did have all the state agencies in. I asked them to do a independent 360 analysis of the proposed merger and really come to their own conclusions. So I was surprised that consistently every single agency came to virtually the same conclusion independently, that the merger as proposed they felt was not in the state's interest. And at that point I felt that it was important to make a statement.
Yeah, that's true, and you did, and these are with some of the most some of the biggest announcements you've made over the last 8 months have been regarding electricity, and so I wanted to ask: does your background as an electrical engineer, does that play in with any of this at all?
I mean, it does in different ways. I mean, I am an electrical engineer, and so I'm pretty systemic about my approach. When I look at the whole energy and energy policy, I really do look at it as a complete system. So, when I am looking, and that's why part of my conversations in DC has been with the EPA, is because I do know that federal regulations impacts in energy here in Hawaii from the output of the refineries to the clean air output out of the generators in HECO. And so, I have been systemically trying to understand what the policy issues are and what the options are, and really trying to define a way forward. In my deciding to run for governor, I felt that there was an opportunity for Hawaii to really be a world leader in renewable energy and energy policy in general. And I really felt that part of, if you look at some of the first clean energy initiatives and legislation passed, and you looked at the progress that the state has made, the state progress has been pretty stagnant over the last several years because of inaction on the regulatory side. And I felt that there truly was a lack of leadership in the energy space. And so I definitely was committed. I do believe that as an electrical engineer, I understand it better than some. And I do believe that exerting leadership really does help to move the state forward as we work toward 100% renewable.
And then I just have a couple more, just kind of so I understand it better. For the, you said you'd be less interested in looking at the numbers. Is that just out of pure interest, or would that kind of change things? Like if Hawaiian Electric cut it in half, or could you maybe consider?
I mean, I think it's a couple things, right? I mean, the numbers are a part of it. There is a part of it is about all of the energy that would be consumed, the people and the resources would be involved with, making the applications for permitting and other reviews that would require to get approval for that LNG infrastructure, and then really for it to be included in the rate base. And as I said, I think with oil at $130 a barrel and the economic and cost savings being that significant, to where we are today, where the price of oil is significantly lower, and the fuel savings between the fossil fuel oil and the fossil fuel LNG has really become much, much smaller. That the energy in the community that would be taken up by approval of that transition to LNG, I think would just better be focused on our challenge with being 100% renewable.
So if we could focus more on just the renewables themselves versus the fuel shift.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think there are lots of things happening, right? I mean, there are refineries around the world that are producing a wide variety of products. You know, the refineries in Hawaii is challenged by the clean air regulations, and and the utilities are challenged in the regulations of the facilities, as well as trying to meet our desire to be 100% renewable. And it's when you look at all of those issues and stack them up and try to figure out which where would best the state of Hawaii expend their energies. I just believe that it would be better for us to expend our energies moving forward on renewables than it would be to transition to LNG, only then to take up the issue of 100% renewable.
And when you say renewables, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, we do know that PV is becoming more affordable, and the rates that we are seeing for the first time are below what it would cost to generate electricity by oil. I do know, and I gave a speech at the pension systems portfolio managers, and had the opportunity to talk with some of the investment managers that invest in infrastructure projects, and they're seeing significant reduction in the cost of PVs coming out of China, and they really do expect that there would be another drop in the price of PV panels. And so, there are a lot of different things happening that I think are changing the landscape. There have been a number of announcements on battery storage, and I do know that battery storage doesn't price out at the utility scale yet, but it's each of those moving forward. I think as more and people move to battery storage, I expect that those would become less expensive. So I think it's just when you look at the basic trends of what's happening in terms of the price of generating electricity from renewables, if you look at the closing of the gap in the price difference between oil and LNG, when you weigh the significant community investment with dealing with that transition to LNG, and all the hearings and all the approvals that would be required to support that change, in my judgment, I just think it's better for us to go straight to renewables.
Yeah, I didn't, previously reporting on it, I hadn't considered all the regulatory loopholes that retrofitting one fossil fuel for another you'd have to go through. And you mentioned the communities on Monday, and those would be, what are the offices that you had spoken to where they told you those communities would be affected by
Well, I think part of it is, and there have been different proposals made about where would you put the storage facility, that always keeps coming up, whether that would be out at Barbers Point and Kalailoa, or whether there would be placed in Honolulu Harbor, in and around. That would become a big challenge about where would you site that import terminal, and there would be permitting and reviews that would be required. I know that there was some discussion by HECO that they would put the LNG on a barge and park the barge in Pearl Harbor, and what would be involved with that, to have LNG sitting in Pearl Harbor, and what exposure would that be from an environmental perspective.
So as you're noting, the renewables they're distributed, the ones that you mentioned earlier, and you also noted the changing in the utilities financing model. So what do you see the future of Hawaii in regards to what's going to support our renewable energy? Is it going to be a partnership, or are you looking more towards the people themselves?
Well, I think it's a combination of both, right? If you look at all of what we've set out as policy, the governor's office working with the state legislature, we've tried to define a path or express a policy. For one, it is about 100% renewable, and the belief that we want to get to be 100%. We've passed the Green Energy Market Securitization Program, the GEMS program, that allows us to provide financing for those who would not be able to afford it. You know, one of the criticisms of just letting the market drive where PV and other renewables are installed is the notion that you have to have it's basically middle and upper income residents that can benefit from PV. So the GEMS program is really focused on being able to finance projects for those that couldn't afford PV so that they can participate. You know, we've passed legislation to create community renewable projects. So looking for those who live in condominiums or others that might not have the space to put PV or participate in others, giving them the opportunity to try and organize a community-based renewable project so that they could be part and participate in that savings that are generated from renewable. So, you know, I think it's we have been committed and we are pursuing on all of these fronts, trying to establish broad policy goals and objectives, but also legislation and laws that create the opportunity for broader participation. So, you know, the typical utility model that HECO grew up on and most of the other utilities across the country are based on is about vertical integration, right? They own the generation facilities, they import the fuel, they generate the power, they distribute it to the homes, you know, they keep track of what all that cost is. Really, I think the utility of the future that we would want to see, you know, supports 100% renewable. It's about distributed generation, and a large portion of that we hope that would be residential of various sorts. Could be, I mean, right now it's about PV, but it could also be wind. You know, it's really about changing the business model from being generated, distribution, delivered to the home to be able to support distributed generation. So the utility would generate some, but there would be individuals as well as other investors that would invest in generating, you know, and the utility would distribute that energy. And then what's the balance? So right now, because most of the revenue is generated by the vertical model, that assumes that the utility controls all of the generation, which I think is really not where we want to be.
So why electric's role would be smaller in the generation side than it is? Well,
and clearly, so I think we need to be a business model that would, you know, facilitate how the utility would, you know, part of it right now is kind of balancing, you know, right now when you're fully vertically integrated, you really don't care how you allocate the revenues, right? I mean, if I'm going to pay the company to generate, distribute, you know, and then bill and collect, how I apportion, and I'm paying, you know, $10 a month, how I apportion that $10 to whether it's to generate the energy, distribute, or administer doesn't really matter. So if I want to support different facets of it, it all ends up in the same place. You know, with a distributed model, you got to make sure that everybody in the chain is making a fair return on investment, or they're not going to invest. So we have to change to have other companies be able to generate. So, and that comes to, as you know, we had a whole round of projects, utility scale PV projects that just went through the cycle. So those were investments that in the past would have been made by the electric utility, and they would be earn a return on investment on those, but they were made by other investors, right? And so how do you create a business model that really apportions the cost appropriately? Because if any part of the model is making excessive profits, then everybody's going to want to invest in that portion of it, but they won't in the others. So how do we calculate what the cost to distribute energy is and figure out some way to create a revenue stream for the utility who owns most of the distribution wires that's fair for that portion of it? How do we get HECO from not relying so much on generating income from running their power plants to be able to get a fair return on other parts of their investment? Because as we go to distributed generation, less and less of the power generated and consumed by the residents of Hawaii will be generated by HECO. And so there needs to be a fair assessment of how they would recover for their investments in that other part of the business.
So as we generate more on our own, Hawaiian Electric's grid would in
Right.
turn supplement?
Well, it's a couple of things, right? I mean, the future of 100% renewable and distributed generation means rather than HECO generating all of the energy and distributing it all to all their customers and administering the cost for that, we're talking about many parties generating electricity, and HECO would collect that and distribute it to the users as needed, and then they would be the ones that would be collecting for payments and being able to continue. Right now, I think if a lot of HECO's cost is really tied up into the generating part, and so part of that is changing the rates and how the rates are aligned and how the cost is apportioned, and being able to have clear interconnection guidelines so that we can invite investors and they can invest in generation. And obviously it's a bid process, so the consumer would be able to benefit from. I know that there's been some discussion about whether HECO should be able to bid on those kinds of generations or they should be excluded, and we've kind of gone through various changes in how we propose to do that. I think those are the questions that we need to focus on.
So outside of that, the customers are going to be paying, like, as you paint it now, like, rooftop solar is not going anywhere. Rooftop solar is going to grow.
Right. I mean, hopefully we will be able to make investments in grid technology that would allow us to increase the penetration of rooftop solar. I think as we better understand storage technology, and we can create a way to encourage investments in storage and then create a way for them to get paid for that investment. I think that's part of the puzzle. The more the grid is able to store energy, the more renewables we can have on the grid. So, I think they're all interrelated in the sense that we want to be able to encourage a wide range of people generating energy from renewable sources.
And then going with that too, when we're looking at everybody that's involved, and back to the partner, you said you're open to looking at a partner, but not necessarily is that partner NextEra.
Right.
What are those? Just to kind of sum it up, what areas can NextEra improve in that you would think they would be a good partner for our state?
Well, it's a couple of things. I think part of that is really embracing what we would want to see in a utility as a partner. And that is someone who embraces the 100% renewable. Part of that is a partner that would want to engage and invite investments in Hawaii in research and development on alternative renewable energy, that would want to seek and invite investments in battery or energy storage, because that needs to be part of the solution. That would encourage research and development, because clearly no other utility grid in the country is situated like we are here in Hawaii on an isolated grid. It's actually 4 or 5 isolated grids where, we are seeing renewable penetration far exceeding any place else in the country, and beginning to better understand how we can better manage generation, better manage demand, and use the best tools we have, both administratively as well as technology, to manage energy production and energy use in a way that clearly would be unique to Hawaii and position Hawaii as the renewable capital in the world.
So would you say that our rooftop solar here, is that a large part in...
I think that right now that's a large part of that, and we do expect that rooftop solar, the prices of PV panels will continue to fall. So I think that is a significant part of that. But if you just look at the opportunity and the challenge of rooftop solar, it generates lots of energy, and the price is getting to the point that it actually can generate energy at less than the cost of generating by fuel oil. So the challenge now is, how do we store it if it's generating it when we don't need it? And then how do we distribute that stored energy in a way that reduces the overall reliance on imported fuel and increases the opportunities for renewables? I think that's the challenge and the opportunity.
Awesome. Great. So yeah, the renewable energy of choice right now, that's rooftop solar. That's what we have. Is that
Right.
what you're saying? Or?
That is, and there are other renewable energy sources. There's been lots of conversations about wind energy, and I do know that there is some community concern about the wind turbines and the placement of those. There have been some inquiries about offshore wind turbines and what that might be. And the advantage to wind turbines is that they're not tied to day and night, and we can generate wind energy throughout the day, even though there are parts of the day that might be more windy than others. Generally, wind will blow, and it'll blow 24 hours a day. So there are a lot of those different kinds of things. Geothermal is a firm renewable source that there has been some exploration. I know that HELCO is in the process on the island of Hawaii about soliciting proposals, and there has been lots of conversation in the past about what a rich geothermal resource is available. And so I think we need to look at those opportunities as well. So I think it's really looking at the whole, and I was on Kona last week at the blessing of the new ocean thermal energy conversion plant. And I know that there has been significant investments made by the federal government and Japanese government in developing that technology. And we're not to the point where that may be scalable to utility size. So that's one risk that's still out there. And really, what would be the cost of generating energy from an OTEC facility? I think those questions are still out there, but I think it's worth, from a Hawaii perspective, investments in OTEC technology creates jobs and other opportunities as we strive to be 100% renewable.
Great. Awesome. Well, I don't know if I've exceeded my time. Okay, well, thanks, Governor. So, okay, so just so I know, walking away, like LNG, is that's firm? That's 100%. Like we're like.
Well, right. I have looked at that issue, and I really believe that the state would be better served by expending their energy in pursuing renewables and the challenges of 100% renewable without expending energy or resources on a transitional imported fossil fuel, only to transition all of that back out to a renewable. You know, I'm saying that I think it would make more sense for us to stay the path, pursue renewables, and not get distracted by the cost, time, and energy involved with transitioning to LNG, only to transition back.
Okay, so yeah, the fuel savings tomorrow, there are too many other, like, if the two companies that really want it, they came down and sat down, they wouldn't be able to sway you, or if the public opinion that wouldn't be able to change your mind.
Well, I mean, you know, I don't live in a vacuum, so obviously if you know, it's hard to speculate. I mean, I think that, you know, I've kind of looked at the issues and you know, tried to be comprehensive in the assessment of the work required and the cost involved. You know, and like I said, I think in my judgment, I just think it makes more sense for us to not do the transition to another imported fossil fuel, only to transition again to 100% renewable. It's that when we look at the potential savings in price compared to all of that is involved to transition from one fossil fuel to another fossil fuel, I just believe that it makes more sense for us to just pursue